Hiya, welcome to My Compound Life. I'm your host, Jonathan. This is a channel where we build assets, we build habits, great habits that we need to manage our assets successfully so that eventually we can build freedom. And that will be financial freedom, time freedom for you and I. Thanks for watching yet another episode of My Compound Life Bitcoin Drive. Let's call it Bitcoin Drive for now. So just make sure you can see me. Okay, so it's about midday, Thursday, not too long until Christmas. I've just made a daily Bitcoin video, so check that out if you haven't already done so. Hit the like, hit subscribe, become my 27th to 30th of subscribers. Keep the momentum coming. It helps me to create more content. It helps me to be more focused in creating better content, right? I do have all your likes, all your comments, all your subscribings helps me to become a better person in a way. So in today's episode, I want to talk a little bit about Bitcoin and the sentiment, okay? Because I think maybe half people still think we are still in a bull cycle for Bitcoin. So these are people that truly believe that Bitcoin 4-year cycle has been broken, right? And of course, that half of people that believe we are becoming a lot more bearish because 4-year cycle continue, right? So I just want to give you my take of the situation, right? So if you're like me, right? So if you follow through My Compound Life, I always talk about having a hodl bag that you hodl for long term. That's where you stash up all of your Bitcoin in a hardware wallet and keep that as a generational wealth for your kids, for your grandkids, and so forth, right? And the other bag, you have a smaller bag, that's your swing bag that you want to buy low and sell high. So if you follow this through, these are just noises, okay? But the fact that I've got friends that are asking me questions, a lot of people are in the middle. Are we bearish? Are we still bullish? In terms of the price action right now, it does seem we are pretty bearish, okay? So 50 days moving average, it's dropping big time. It's dropping fast, right? I think as soon as Bitcoin hits back to its 50 days moving average, it's around 95,000 USD right now. I'll start to de-risk more, right? So I think maybe about a month ago when I was talking about 50 days moving average, we were still at around 100, 102,000 or even 105,000, right? But with how much sell pressure are going on, right? I think it does seem liquidity not immediately coming back, okay? So you've got the TAs, letting us know, the indicators that we're not in a bullish situation anymore. We've seen price action essentially indicate that a lot of OGs, whales, big whales, these are people who have been in Bitcoin for a long period of time, that still follows through strongly of the 4-year cycle. You can't disregard that, okay? You cannot disregard that. These are people that have abundance of Bitcoin, abundance of money, right? And these are usually people that will drive the Bitcoin price. So if majority of the OGs, the whales of Bitcoin already, taking profits, right? Essentially that means one thing, they are the driving force of the Bitcoin price. Okay, and of course, understand every single of my video I do have coverage to say that ETF are buying, ETF are accumulating, ETF are gobbling up Bitcoin of their daily supply, right? Like 450 daily Bitcoin gets generated. That ETF strategy, all of these big institutions are buying out all of the Bitcoin as soon as they get issued, right, or minted. But these money, trust me, they're not coming in constantly, right? So you need to get into the mindset where OGs, us, retail, right, you and I, when we go in and buy Bitcoin, we have the strongest intent of hodling it and sell it until all-time high, right? So that's why for the past 3 cycles, Bitcoin does have a parabolic move, like that God's green candle, right? And this time around, ETF, they're not OGs, they're just retail investors that gets frightened out, right? They'll go all in, and at the same time, as soon as the price drop a little bit, they're not gonna hodl, they're not gonna hold it for another 4 years like you and I. Immediately after a 10% drop, they will sell. They'll sell they'll sell a majority of their bag, right? And they'll de-risk and they'll rebalance. Okay, so you need to factor all this in terms of the profile of sellers. These are profile of buyers, apologies. So these are buyers that are very unlike, that they're not the same type of buyers anymore, right? So that's why Bitcoin will not have that parabolic move upwards or parabolic move downwards, okay? And knowing that OGs have already, they are continually de-risking, they're continually selling, they're not going to immediately come back, right? And very likely they will come back towards end of next year, like I've always tell you about, right? So why? Because that would be the best time to reaccumulate Bitcoin, because that would be the time when Bitcoin would be at its bottom, okay? So knowing that OG whales, they're not going to come in immediately, right? ETF, they're the worst type of retail buyers. They get frightened out easily. They'll just go in and out, based on the price action of Bitcoin, okay? And of course, I know I did mention about in one of my yesterday video, talking about Bitcoin buyers. The biggest one that are coming will be the institution, the private banks, the high net worth individual, yada yada yada, right? But more importantly, that portion of money is not gonna come in immediately, right? You're gonna have to think about the bank managers, gonna have to pitch to them to say that, hey, you guys need to diversify, right? It's not as if Bank of America said 4% allocation, everyone automatically allocates, right? It's high risk for them. They're gonna rethink, consider, maybe they'll start to shift 1%, 2%. It's gonna take time for that money to pour in, and very likely that money pouring in will not happen until maybe later next year, right? So I'm not fudding. I'm not creating a FUD video. I'm just trying to let you guys know the reality. I've been through a lot of these cycles, right? There will always be social media influencers that says rate cut's coming. It's gonna bring up the price of Bitcoin. Yes, indeed it did. No doubt it did for a temporary period of time. Then it dropped big time. Okay, market makers made it, right? So another thing is, you've got market makers trying to make money here and there, liquidating long and short, right? So they're gonna constantly be doing this, right? There will be constant pain holding Bitcoin, right? So if you are not a trader, if you're investors like myself, these are noises, right? So I want you guys to recognize these noises and not to be too hype up when Jerome Powell says, oh, there's a rate cut, or when the rate cut's not actually coming, right? So these will definitely affect prices in the short period of time. But in the longer run, if we hodl in spot, we should be fine, right? 3-4 years time, you will see your money back, right? And that will essentially be 3x, 4x, 5x. If you somehow capture the bottom, right, and then sell the high, you may get another 7 or 8x, right? 7 times, 8 times of your investment. So imagine that, £10,000 put into Bitcoin, 4 years down the line, if you're lucky, you get 40, 50,000 pound, right, from your £10,000 investment. If you're extremely lucky, like bullish scenario, that you bought the low, sell the high, all in one go, without going through that pound cost average strategy, maybe you get £10,000 will get you £80,000, £90,000. And guys, these are life-changing wealth, right? So I'm still long-term bullish, but I want to let you guys know all of these noises that are around in the market, but essentially it might not it will have some knee-jerk reaction in terms of the Bitcoin pricing. But as long as you trade, not trade, as long as you invest for the longer period of time, you're fine, right? You're not a trader, right? So I don't really talk about leverage trading. So very likely whoever watches this, you're not a leverage traders, because there's no point watching me. I don't talk about TA much, okay? Another thing, I think Bank of Japan rate hike today, tomorrow, right? It will cause some knee-jerk reaction again, okay? And somehow I still believe, yes, Bank of Japan rate hike, it happened before, right? That would result in the carry trade downfall, okay? It happened before. 20-30% Bitcoin price will get down. I don't believe this will happen instantaneously, right? So rate hike, there'll be some knee-jerk reaction, Bitcoin goes down, and then give it another 1 to 2 weeks. We're gonna have to see who gets affected by the carry trade, right? There will be traders, there'll be investors, there'll be institution investors that just finally came to their understanding that they cannot hold anymore. They have to sell off their assets to close the trade, to pay back the loans, right? So there would be this type of investors or institutions, and this will, we'll see this in another 1 to 2 weeks time, right? So CPI data, I somehow felt CPI comes out, we all do know that there will probably be no more rate cut next year, okay? Although Trump loves a rate cut, but the extent of the economy, if put yourself in Jerome Powell's shoes, right? If you do see the market, interest rate are going crazy, right? And then the market are doing exceptionally well, the stock market, right? Bitcoin already peaked, right? Will he pump more liquidity into the market? That will essentially drive up inflation even further. Probably not, right? So that's why Jerome Powell, the Fed, US Fed, are using strategic words. They're not calling it quantitative easing, right? There might be some stealth QE, quantitative easing, right? But I don't personally see a mass quantitative easing into an already performing market, okay? Because that will essentially fuel up so much inflation, and you know, essentially US will be so screwed, right? So these are things that you need to work that out in your mind to say what's the probability that will happen, right? And highly likely, I think that would play out. And so that's why I don't foresee more rate cut or more QE immediately coming into the market. And this is why I want you and I to be prepared, right? So always have a hodl back and a swing back, right? We are bearish in terms of our swing back at the moment because we want to get out of our swing back, right? And very likely we cannot right now because you don't want to get out of Bitcoin at 70,000 USD, right? You want to come out at around 150 to 100,000, right? But we will not get there anytime soon, be it for a relief rally or, you know, somehow you believe, some people might believe that liquidities are coming back into the market next year, like Tom Lee, right? Tom Lee said, you know, end of next year, right? So we need to be prepared, right? We need to be prepared. If you have got cash right now, right? So here's the scenario, right? If you're new into Bitcoin, if you're new recently watching my video, right? Hit the like, hit subscribe first and become my subscribers and let me know in the comment section. If you're new into Bitcoin, I think yes, it's good time to start accumulation, but don't go all in, right? Because have the expectation that what if we are going into a bear market very soon next year, starting from Q1 or Q2, right? So it's not instantaneously Bitcoin is going to dip, right? It will take a few months before it, you know, dips further down. So it's kind of like retracing, chopping around 87, 90, you know. No one's making money right now except for market makers and crypto exchanges, right? And you guys well know who they are, right? So if you're new, I think pound cost average, buy in. If you get a relief rally or if liquidity does come in, you know, you get yourself a good bonus, right? But the probability of that happening, it's very, very low now because what I've just mentioned, right? The technical analysis, the price action is not supporting it. The profile of buyers, the OGs, they left the party, right? And we're relying on, you know, the ETF, the high net worth individual to come in and bring in more champagnes. They're not going to come in and bring boxes of champagne. They don't even know what Bitcoins are right now, right? They're just dipping their toes into this investment. They're just going to bring a bottle, 2 bottles, and that's it, right? So you need to be prepared of that liquidity is not going to instantaneously pour in, and very likely we're going to go into a bear market next year, right? So bear market very highly likely next year, 70-80%. So that's why when you slice and dice your cash, right? So if you're investors that already have a bag that you want to get out, sorry, you're too late for your altcoins, right? Very likely, you know, it's not going to get back up anytime soon, right? If you get a relief rally, if you can break even or even sell at a loss, right? That's a hard decision that you need to make, right? Because what you want to do is to position yourself and re-enter during the bear market next year, right? So even for myself, I de-risked some, I took profit, thank goodness for that, right? That's a lesson I learned to always take profits when we're going up, right? So very likely what I'm gonna do is I'll try to stack cash, right? Every now and then, every good bounces, slight of a dead cat bounce, I'll sell off, and I want to position myself so that I can re-enter at the bear market. Okay, and that's the mentality that you guys need, right? So don't let the internet, social media hype to tell you that rate cuts coming, there will be no effect on the Bank of Japan rate hike, because people know about, people knows about the risk, and they're not gonna put in too much emphasis on this, right? There will be some companies, that took, that borrow too much. There will always be companies that will always borrow too much from Japan, and then now having that squeeze, right? And we've got market makers trying to make money off the leverage traders, not from you and I. We're in spot, we're fine, but from the leverage traders, that needs to be considered. And you know what, liquidity, are they coming in? Not anytime soon, guys, right? Be prepared that it might do. Even if it does, it's not going to be a mass amount, right? You still have plenty of the OGs, the big whales, the Bitcoin whales, that are unwilling to risk more of their money into capturing a short-term dead cat bounce, right? I know a lot of people are talking about super cycle. Tom Lee talks about the bounce, the all-time high will be next year. But look at how much Tom Lee are getting paid by BitMine, right? He doesn't go on CNBC for nothing, right? He's getting paid by big institutions like BitMine to go in to chat greatness about Ethereum. And look at the Ethereum price action right now, right? You only have ETF buying in. And I've warned you that ETF retailers are the worst. They'll sell off almost immediately to de-risk, right? They're not like the ordinary old school OG hodlers like you and I that are willing to hodl for 4 years, right? Which, by the way, 4 years worth of hodling is actually a lot better than you holding stocks for 4 years, right? Or holding, okay, I can't say stocks, because holding Tesla definitely was better, was one of my better bag. But holding something like S&P 500, right? You hold it for 4 years, you will not get that return, right? So imagine you hold Bitcoin for 4 years, you get 8x, 9x, 8 times, 9 times return, versus you hold S&P 500 for 10 years, you might get 2x return, like times 2 of your return. Okay, so you tell me, what do you want to hold, right? Write in the comment right now. Do it right now. I don't care, do it right now, and hit the like and subscribe too. Yeah, so be prepared, guys. I mean, not a FUD video, but I just want all of us to be a lot more cleverer in terms of knowing the risk and the risk where possible. And I simply don't want you guys to be buying too much crypto and hold your bag. Because I still hold a lot of shitcoin bags that I haven't been able to get out yet, right? I've tried very hard to get out already for the past 2 cycles, and I still hold some, right? And trust me, it's not great holding crypto for a long period of time, except for Bitcoin, right? So that's the only asset equivalent to gold, digital gold, that you want to hold for generational wealth purpose. Okay, so yes, that's it. That's all I want to share in this video. So hit the like, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.